I just want to ask you something about the general discussion of racial inequality issues in the country. Since the publication of your book, these last 2-3 years, um, the fervor around Black Lives Matter has reached fever pitch in 2000 with the killing of George Floyd, and has since, it seems, ebbed. We're starting to see some political pushback against the progressive DAs in one place or another. There's grumbling and some signs of a shifting tide. And I'm wondering if you think that's a good thing, or how you're processing the we may have reached a kind of peak anti-racism wokeness, and we may be in retreat from some of those more intense affirmations of the diversity, equity, and inclusion. The Supreme Court, I don't know, again, what you would say, but I would bet money that they're going to significantly undercut racial affirmative action in the decision that they'll be coming to in the fall. Do you see, what do you see by way of the drift? And we both write about and think about these issues a lot.
Well, as you know, I'm a great admirer of your work on self-censorship. At your conference in your honor last month, I spoke about this paper, and certainly you can see a lot of that playing out on campuses and in communities. In terms of discussion of issues, where people are very guarded in what they feel that they can say and talk about, and so there is that. There's no question. But Glenn, there's also something very, very disturbing going on in terms of the reaction to what has been labeled critical race theory. That, in fact, the label is being applied so broadly as to be dealing with, sometimes just, basic historical fact. Sometimes I get the impression. And I just read a piece, I think it was yesterday or today, in ProPublica about an educator from Maryland. Her name is Cecilia Lewis. I don't know if you saw this, but
I didn't.
She was hired into, I think Cherokee County, Georgia, to, by the school district. And, she happens to be Black. She, the position itself was defined to some degree in the language of diversity, equity, inclusion, although her background, she actually initially thought CRT meant something totally different. She's really not aware of any connection to this kind of legal scholarship. But in any case, be that as it may, she accepted a position in Georgia and was completely hounded out to the point where, I think the position was retracted, went to a neighboring county, Cobb County, and was followed over there. And really a whole bunch of people are swarming, and partly through a coordinated national campaign where a script is being distributed. So the anti-CRT mob attacks, in fact, are just as disturbing to me as the self-censorship and the unwillingness to discuss certain issues and certain things that you have pointed out that may well be disturbing, that might be happening in classrooms. I think there are legitimate points to be made about what our educators are doing in the classroom. But that's not what I see what's going on. What I see what's going on is that there are things that ought to be debated and questioned and brought to the surface. But instead of that, there's a very active, nationally coordinated campaign to mob school districts in ways that gets innocent people who are trying to just basically do right by the children, hounded out of jobs or school boards and so on. So I'm disturbed by what's going on, but it's not just I'm not just disturbed, by the content of instruction and the unwillingness to discuss it openly. I'm also disturbed by the reaction to it. So it's a depressing time with regard to the education system for me personally.
Yeah. Okay. I don't know if I agree in every respect. I do acknowledge the existence of this reaction that you're talking about, and it can be disturbing. As disturbing as the underlying predicate, I don't know.
Different kinds of phenomenon.
We'll have to see. There is a kind of McCarthyist thing. You say a coordinated campaign. Christopher Rufo's name is going to come up here. He's the journalist, writes at the City Journal, Manhattan Institute, who's made a big deal out of uncovering the excesses of critical race theory. Critical race theory going from a very discreet Kimberly Crenshaw, Derek Bell kind of legal scholarship thing into a broad umbrella that includes everything from teaching the 1619 Project in schools to anti-racism seminars for kids to make them aware of, et cetera. Ibram X. Kendi and books that are adopted. Do we read these books? And some of the banning of books and the broad, heavy-handed, you want to teach people about the history of race in this country. I don't trust you to do it because I think you're going to indoctrinate our kids. You're going to make the white kids hate each other and whatnot.
Yeah.
Sure. There's some of that going on. But what I would say is, I say this with respect. I wonder how you react to this. I say this with respect to the discussion of crime and policing and violence. You play by the race card, you live by it, you die by it. Don't defund the police, deracialize the discussion about police. If you insist on making race the predicate of every discussion about social obligation and justice, you're going to get a backlash, because how can you make white people into the sole morally responsible agents of the persistence of racial inequality? How can you presume of a person in virtue of the fact that they're white, that they're somehow privileged, and not expect the reaction amongst some white people to be, you're calling attention to my race, you're making race susceptible. Okay, then let's talk about race. Let's talk about race. You don't like Western civilization? Where's your civilization? You think that the United States of America has blood on its hands? Well, how did the modern world get made? And what other world would you rather live in? Go anywhere and you're going to find a mess of blood, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not surprised that if you call attention to white cops beating up black kids, somebody else is going to call attention to black thugs beating up innocent white people. And do you know there are a lot more of the latter than there are of the former? You can't control the racial thing. You play that card, and the whirlwind is what you'll reap. Best to talk about people in their universal humanistic statuses as those deserving of the dignity of other humankind than to racialize every discussion. The fact that Brown doesn't have the same percentage of black kids majoring in physics as it's majoring in sociology needn't constitute an indictment of Brown as a racist institution. The fact that a kid is uncomfortable when someone makes an argument about a relevant political issue, Ketanji Brown Jackson's status as the most qualified person to be appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, for example. You're going to make a federal case out of Elia Shapiro at the Georgetown Law School. You're going to harden the hearts of many, many people in the legal profession who don't want that kind of racial indoctrination imposed upon themselves. And they're going to fight back, et cetera. I mean, in other words, I think we're reaping to a certain extent what we have sown in this backlash.
Again, but who is reaping and who is sowing? The people who is doing the sowing, in the context of the ideas that you have just described, are not the ones who are experiencing the backlash. They are celebrated. Their careers are perfectly fine. They are inoculated against the backlash. The backlash is against these educators, the frontline workers who really don't know what on earth is going on. They don't even know what critical race theory is. And they're being attacked, in school board meetings and basically told that, they're indoctrinating the kids. And, honestly, a lot of them are bewildered by this. The backlash is not falling on the people who, in your telling, have triggered the backlash. Backlash is spread far and wide on folks who have, no idea how on earth this came to be. So I think it's not reaping and sowing.
You were just at Barry Weiss's Common Sense Substack.
Yeah, I was.
So you have followed, I assume, her reporting on what is going on in American K through 12 education, especially not only her personally, but her column, especially in the elite schools in New York City where parents have been in revolt. Some parents, so-called conservative parents, because these are not McCarthyite fascists who are trying to, get Toni Morrison's books out of the library.
Yeah,
These are people who object when a teacher says, I want to show Glenn Loury and John McWhorter and Roland Fryer's work to my students to counteract Nicole Hannah-Jones, The Balance, and Ibram X. Kendi and Ta-Nehisi Coates, and are told by the headmaster, no, you can't do that because then the kids will be, et cetera. And I'm sorry for the personal reference, but I do take it personally. I take it personally that Clarence Thomas, a Black man, one of the most significant figures in American history of the last 50 years, whose story is absolutely iconic. He happens to be a conservative. Is remembered in a single, if you ask one of these progressive teachers to talk to their kids about Clarence Thomas, can you imagine what they're going to say to them? And, in other words, I'm sorry, I'm rambling. The narrative is contested in educational circles and certainly in higher education circles, but I think it's also true in K through 12. The progressives have by far had the upper hand. The backlash is calling to account people who have abused their power to enforce a particular way of looking at these racial issues on these kids. And it's fair ground. That's where I'm going with this. Let's fight it out. It's fair ground.
There's no question that in some schools, especially elite private schools, yes, it's fair ground. But this has gone way beyond that. And I would urge you and others to read this ProPublica report on the Cobb County and Cherokee County,
I will,
Georgia, where the extraordinary level of malice directed towards somebody who was completely undeserving. It's just a case. You talked earlier about anecdotal evidence versus statistical evidence.
I will.
Yeah, but it's deeply researched. And okay, maybe there is an agenda there. Maybe there's a bias there in the reporting. But I believe that focusing on the sort of elite Manhattan institutions where certain changes to curricula may have unsettled parents in a way that's entirely justified, and where the pushback is itself justified, is, I think, focusing on too narrow a range of phenomena. That this backlash goes way beyond that into just about it's the folks who are generally centrist, maybe right of center, left of center, doing their jobs as educationists, and they've got some there are darts being thrown that are hitting people who are really undeserving, way beyond the elite Manhattan school cultures. These are very, I'm sure that it's the phenomena you're describing is accurate. I just don't think that's really all that widespread, and where the backlash is coming is not discriminating or not distinguishing between where it's deserved and where it's not. So